Hi, I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics, I love them, and welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. On today's episode, we're talking about Dark Spaces Dungeon by Scott Snyder and Hayden Sherman. This trade collects Dark Spaces Dungeon, issues number 1 through 5. Dark Spaces is Scott Snyder's grounded horror line in an imprint that he created in IDW. He wrote 2 stories in it, Dark Spaces Dungeon, and the other is Wildfire. So basically, we can skip the Dark Spaces. That's just the imprint. This one is just called Dungeon. This is an indie comic published by IDW. You don't really need to know anything about these characters before you read this. You can just hop right in. If you follow the channel, you know that I mostly follow DC and Marvel, but I'm trying to read like a ton of other indie comic books. More importantly, I'm learning that I love horror comics, and this is a great freaking horror comic. The reason I love horror comics as opposed to horror movies, there are no jump scares in horror comics. That is literally why. I can read them with all the lights on, okay? I love them. Okay, for the story. Before he was DC Comics' golden boy, Scott Snyder was a horror comic writer. And my favorite Batman story leans into horror more than it leans into anything else. It is Batman Black Mirror. It's my favorite Batman story written by Scott Snyder. I think it's incredible. With all of the success at Distillery also currently happening, I really want to see what happens when he creates his own characters. What does it look like? I like seeing characters in their horror roots. So here we are. And Hayden Sherman is crushing right now, so I want to see what he had going on. This story is about a detective who is kidnapped as a child, and he escaped the kidnapping after several years. And that detective's name is Bodhi Madoc. When he was kidnapped, he was subject to like body torture. He was kept in a dungeon with kind of like Saw, where there's not like gore, but he was tortured, and there's this dungeon that has pieces that kind of like push into you, making it like really uncomfortable, and they add all this pressure on your body from different locations, and he was able to escape that, which was crazy. He was subject to torture by a crazy person named The Keep. 21 years later, so now he's a detective, he meets Tyler Letts, this guy who is very well off, moves to the woods in New York and goes on a run, and he runs into like one of the hatches into these dungeons. Because he calls the authorities, Tyler's son gets kidnapped. Okay, and so Bodhi is the detective placed on this job, and it's their story of trying to find this guy's son. It is crazy. Takes so many turns, and it is so freaking good. I think I learned a trope in horror that I like, trauma going into the horror. I just think it adds such a layer to the fear, which I really love. And I think this story does masterfully. So they go on a quest to find this killer and everyone else that he's kidnapped. And basically that's all I'm going to say about this book. It is crazy, and if you're into horror comics, you should totally read it. It also has a crazy twist ending that was perfectly executed, and it was awesome, and I loved it. It was just great. Like a great book that had me on the edge of my seat. I could not read it fast enough. Now for the art. If I'm being completely honest, Hayden Sherman was the reason I also picked up this book. I'm reading Absolute Wonder Woman right now. I met him at Comic-Con. I think that he is one of the best artists currently working. I just think he's awesome. My comic shop owner I remember telling him that Hayden Sherman was on Absolute Wonder Woman after Comic-Con, and I talked to Hayden Sherman, and he was like, oh my gosh, dude, you need to read Dark Spaces Dungeon. They didn't have it. I recently just found it on the rack, so it skipped my need to read line, and I grabbed it. He was stoked because of how well the series was. And I have to say, I agree. Even after seeing Absolute Wonder Woman, I knew it was something I wanted to like pick up based on his art. I just want to know what he's done before, because his art is so interesting, and I'm seeing it so many places now. I'd say that it reminds me of Gabriel Walta, and I mean that in the best way. Hayden draws such a haunting human perspective, and especially in like a horror book, crazy good. He just draws really simple lines that convey emotion so well. The panel layout, tremendous, okay? And the horror tone translates so well. The way he lays out his pages, it's beautiful. It's perfect. I think it's exactly like the strength of this medium. It's young. It's awesome. The character design is masterful. I would just land saying the art is very cool. It is just a very cool book. And so I also want to shout out the colorist, Patricio Del Pesce. Amazing colors. It's very much like a Jordi Belair sensibility where it's like very soft colors. They almost look like they're watercolored. It's so cool. And like the way that complements Hayden's art and pencils is just amazing. Incredible. I loved it. Now for the rating, I'm going to give the story an 8.7 out of 10. I think it's necessary reading for any horror fan. I think it's amazing. I'm going to go pick up Wildfire, and I'm going to review that soon for you guys. My name's Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. I'll see you guys next time.